comets visited from space. From what we have read, we realise that there are certain definite facts known about the planets. In the first place, they may be regarded as being more or less solid objects. They move around the sun in orbits that are almost circular, never travelling so far away as to be lost to our sight, and they are regular in their motions. That is to say, we can predict their positions with accuracy. We have now to consider an entirely different class of heavenly bodies, comets, which differ from planets in almost every respect. Comets and their tails. The name comet comes from the Latin coma, a hair. These objects are so called because they often carry a hair-like tail. Strange to say, we do not know what comets really are, nor what is their origin. For one thing, there have not been many bright comets that could be examined with modern instruments, the majority of those visible in recent times being comparatively small. It seems probable, however, that comets are largely composed of gaseous matter, or at the most consist of swarms of meteors held together by their mutual attractive powers. A comet consists primarily of two parts, the head or nucleus and the tail. Although the heads of different comets do not differ very much from each other except in their size and colour, there are considerable differences in their tails. Sometimes these are short, whilst at other times they are curved and long. Often there is more than one tail, and comets without tails are not unknown. Almost without exception, however, the tails of comets point away from the sun as though there is some kind of solar force that repels them. The eclipse and the parabola. Another point of difference between comets and planets is their movement through space. In most cases, this movement is so irregular that it is impossible for us to tell when a bright comet will be seen in the heavens. To understand this, we must explain that there are two kinds of comets, the solar comets and the interstellar comets. The former follow regular paths and belong to the solar system, but the latter travel far out in the depths of space among the stars, as their name implies. Those of you who have studied geometry know the difference between an ellipse and a parabola. The solar comet travels in elliptical or closed orbits in one of the foci of which the sun is situated. The interstellar comets travel in parabolic or open orbits that are quite different from the type of orbits pursued by the solar comets. A comet that travels in an elliptical orbit returns at regular intervals, but as a parabola is an open curve with its two branches stretching away from each other and always getting further apart, a comet that travels in this type of orbit visits the solar system only once. Unfortunately, the largest and brightest comets of history seem to have belonged to the interstellar comets, which have come unexpectedly and are not subject to periodical returns. Comets as portents. It would seem that in past ages comets excited even more fear than total eclipses. Perhaps this was due to the fact that, although the ancients were able to predict eclipses, they were quite unable to give any idea as to when a comet would appear. It was thought that the comets were signs sent by the gods as a warning of some coming disaster. Others associated comets with an extraordinary happening that might chance to occur at a convenient time. For instance, the Romans thought that a great comet that appeared in 43 BC was a chariot sent by the gods to transport the soul of Julius Caesar, who had been assassinated shortly before. William of Malmesbury, writing about the death in 1066 of Henry, King of France, said, "Sooner after, a comet, denoting, as they say, a change of kingdoms, appeared trailing its extended and fiery train along the sky. Wherefore a certain monk of our monastery, bowing down with terror at the sight of the brilliant star, exclaimed, 'Thou art come, I have seen thee long since, but now I behold thee much more terrible, threatening to hurl destruction on this country.'" Later, the immortal Shakespeare voiced the general opinion when he wrote those celebrated lines in Julius Caesar. "When beggars die, there are no comets seen, the heavens themselves blaze forth the death of princes." It is rather fortunate for astronomy that the ancients were so interested in comets, for their records, and particularly those of the Chinese, have been of the greatest assistance to us in tracing out the past appearances and history of certain comets. Halley's Comet. A whole book could be written about the famous comets of history. As our space is limited, we can only briefly mention one that is of great interest. This is the comet named after the celebrated English astronomer Halley, a great friend of Sir Isaac Newton, who, in his famous Principia, made the suggestion that comets revolve around the sun as the planets do. Halley determined to investigate the orbits of certain bright comets, and he mapped out the orbits of 24 which had appeared between 1337 and 1698. He noticed that there were three that followed orbits so remarkably similar that it seemed they could scarcely be different comets, but rather three different appearances of the same comet at intervals of 75 years. Going further back, Halley found that a bright comet had been seen on 3 previous dates, separated by similar intervals to those that separated the 3 later appearances. This made 6 appearances in all, each separated by a period of 75 years. Halley predicted that the comet would return again in the year 1757. He did not live to see the fulfillment of his prediction, for he died in 1742, 8 years after his prediction had been made. His work was not forgotten, however, and as the year 1757 drew near, preparations were made by several astronomers to search for the comet. But all the professional observers were outdone, for the comet was discovered on Christmas night, 1758, by an amateur astronomer named Palich, with only a small telescope. The fulfillment of the prediction definitely established the fact that some comets do return at regular intervals, and we shall always remember that we owe this discovery to Edmund Halley. The Tail of the Comet. Although it is a long time since people regarded comets as warnings of fateful things to come, the most superstitious peoples of the world shall still show alarm when one of these fiery phenomena appear in the sky. On the last appearance of Halley's comet, early in the present century, it was known that the Earth would pass through the tail of the comet. Some primitive Asiatics, fearing the worst, are said on that occasion to have prepared barrels of water into which they could leap for safety when the dread time came. Actually, in passing through the tail of the comet, the Earth went through a vacuum more complete than any man can produce, and there was no need for such panic-stricken preparations. When Halley's comet appeared on this occasion, it was calculated that it reflected as much of the light of the sun as would a single body with a diameter of 25 miles, and that its transparent surface, as well as could be seen, was about 300,000 times the size of such a body. Modern astronomers have noticed that comets seem to deteriorate each time they circle the sun, there is wasting away. In 1846, astronomers actually saw the destruction of Biela's comet. The 2 parts into which it broke were seen 6 years later to be 1.5 million miles apart, and that occasion was the last appearance of the comet. In 1872, when Biela's comet should again have been seen, all that was observed was a particularly fine display of meteors. Of recent years, 1939 was one of exceptional comet activity. The return of 5 periodic comets was observed, and 5 new comets were discovered, one of which was bright enough to have been seen with the naked eye. The stars in the sky. The objects that we have considered, planets, comets, and meteors, all belong to the solar system, revolve around the sun, and are governed by his gravitational powers. We are now to learn something of the stars themselves, which are vastly different from the planets. In the first place, there is a difference in their appearance, to which we referred when dealing with the discovery of Uranus. Even with the naked eye, one can tell the difference between a planet and a star. For whereas a planet seldom twinkles, but shines with a steady light, a star twinkles almost unceasingly. Then again, if we look through the telescope, a planet presents a definite disk, whereas a star is but a shining point of light, no matter how powerful the telescope may be. But the greatest difference that we can observe is the fact that the stars never change their positions relative to one another, whilst night by night a planet moves its position among the stars. The name planet means a wanderer, and it was given to those objects by the ancients. They had noticed that these objects moved about the stars. As we have already seen, the planets are other worlds circling round the sun in company with the Earth. We have now to learn that the sun is a star, and that the stars themselves are suns. Whether or not these other suns have planets circling around them as our star has, we do not know, because they are so far away that even our most powerful telescopes cannot show them. Distances of the stars. The distances of the stars are indeed enormous. Alpha Centauri, the nearest star, is over 25 billions of miles away from us. This is a number that we cannot be expected to understand, but let us try to gain some idea of what it means. If we were to commence counting, we should have to spend something like 300,000 years without stopping day or night before we reach 24 billion. Many of you no doubt have heard of the red corpuscles, tiny discs in our blood. They are so minute as if it were possible to pile one on top of another, as coins are sometimes seen piled in a bank. It would take about 15,000 corpuscles to form a pile 1 inch in height. If we allow one corpuscle to stand for each mile in the distance it separates us from Alpha Centauri, we would require a pile no less than 26,000 miles in height to represent the total distance. Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, is over twice the distance of Alpha Centauri. These illustrations refer only to the distances of the nearest stars, and would not serve to represent the distance of the majority of stars, in comparison with which Alpha Centauri and Sirius are comparatively close to us. Meaning of light year. Astronomers have found that it is useless to endeavour to express a star's distance in miles, and so they use another standard. We know that light takes time to travel through space, exactly as sound takes time to travel through air. If we watch a gun fired, say, a mile away, we first see a puff of smoke, and then hear the report of the explosion, the interval between depending on our distance from the gun. Sound travels at about 1,100 feet a second, but light is infinitely more swift, travelling some 186,000 miles a second. At this rate, it takes but a second and a quarter to reach us from the moon, and about 8 minutes from the sun. To cross the intervening gulf of space from Alpha Centauri, however, it requires 4 years and 4 months, during which time it is travelling at 186,000 miles each second. Thus, if Alpha Centauri were to be extinguished at the present moment, it would continue to be visible to us as a star for 4 years and 4 months. Astronomers use the rate that light takes to travel to express the distance of the stars. Alpha Centauri is said to be 4 1/3 light years, Sirius is 8 1/2 light years, and Procyon 10 1/2 light years distant. Vega, the bright blue star in the constellation of Lyra, is some 21 light years distant, and Polaris, the pole star, is 44 light years away from us. If you are interested in making calculations, you can easily work out the distance in miles of any of these stars by multiplying the number of seconds in the light years, and again multiplying your result by 186,000. We must mention that it is not necessarily the brightest stars that are nearest to us. Everyone knows that the stars are not all of the same brightness. Indeed, it has been said that no 2 stars shine with exactly the same amount of light. Although the bright stars may seem to be nearer to us than the faint ones, it is more than likely that they are larger or more luminous suns at a great distance, while the faint stars may be smaller or less brilliant suns near at hand. The stars are divided into constellations or groups, and it is believed that this was done ages ago by the Chaldean shepherds. They fancied the stars formed figures in the sky, just as we sometimes imagine we can see pictures in the fire. The Chaldeans gave these star figures names, and these same names have persisted to this day. The Chaldean shepherds also made up imaginary tales and legends about the deeds performed by their heroes in the skies. And although most of these stories have been lost, a few of them have been handed down to us today. Since the days of the Chaldeans, much knowledge has been gained of the heavenly bodies by means of the telescope and the spectroscope. Yet the wonder remains that without these comparatively modern aids to the astronomer, these wise men of ancient Babylon were able to learn